Hi friends, welcome back to the Avocado Toast Budget. If you're new here, my name is Lexa, and every single time that I do a YNAB budget for me or a budget with me video, I get tons of questions about why my YNAB budget looks a little bit different than yours does. And the answer to this is the YNAB Toolkit. This shit is awesome. It allows you to customize your YNAB budget far beyond what just YNAB offers you in their traditional settings. Plus, it's free and it's really easy, but if you don't know what the settings are, it might be tricky for you to conceptualize which ones you want to leave off and on, and how you can get the functions that I have set up on my YNAB budget through the toolkit. So I wanted to create a video going over my top favorite settings in the YNAB toolkit. That way you can decide what is best for you to use inside of your budget. This is video number 2 to our new series of YNAB Fridays. I get lots of questions about the YNAB app, the system, why I like it so much, and certain parts about how to make it the best it can be for you. So last week I covered the 4 rules, which is like the foundation of YNAB, and before we hop into different aspects of the YNAB app, I wanted to talk about this YNAB toolkit. That way you have a better understanding of the resources that I use from it. We have got a lot of different settings to cover today. I think we have like over 20 of my favorite settings, which ones I decide to turn on, which ones I go ahead and leave off, and how they can work for you. So if you enjoyed this video and you learned something cool, please remember to give it a big thumbs up. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm, helps boost this video to the top. That way more people can find this content. And let's go ahead and get into it. I'm actually going to go ahead and start screen recording and pop this up on my screen. That way you can see what I'm talking about while I talk about it. So you can see I just Googled YNAB Toolkit, pops up Toolkit for YNAB. This is what it looks like on a MacBook on a Chrome. I have it here, and then we can see up here this little plus sign. Since I already have it installed on my computer, when I click on it, it pops up this Toolkit for YNAB, and I can go ahead and open the settings from here. This just means when it's green, it's turned on. You can also turn it off and it turns it red. I always have it on. But I wanted to point out that it is a browser extension because these same changes are like not going to transfer over to a different computer or a different browser, and it's not going to show up inside of your phone on the app. Because it doesn't make permanent changes to your budget, it just messes with the software. Again, I'm not very techy. But it has tons of users, amazing reviews. You can see here, like all 5 stars. It is really awesome, and from what I can tell from the other techie people, it is also really safe to use as well. So with that being said, let's go ahead and go over the toolkit for YNAB and which settings I like to use. I also want to give a big shout out to Nick True. He is like known as the YNAB dude here on YouTube. He actually introduced me to the toolkit for YNAB like a year ago, more than 2 years ago, whenever I first started using YNAB, because I was curious too why some of these YouTubers I was watching, their budget looked different. He has a really awesome video about his favorite settings as well, but I believe that that video was filmed back in 2018 or 2019, so some things have changed. Different settings are now available because YNAB has changed its program. So this is the updated version from 2021, so hopefully this video will be really helpful to you as well. So whenever you are on Google Chrome and you have this extension popped up, you can just click this little plus sign, click open settings, and it's going to pull up this screen right here. This is where you adjust your settings off and on. One thing I want to mention that is really important to note is that if you are changing any settings, you do need to click save, step 1, and inside of your YNAB budget, you need to, if you have it pulled up, refresh the screen, because the changes are not going to show up until you have hit this refresh button. So that is just something to keep in mind. The first setting that I want to talk about is inside of this general tab, and it is the budget quick switch. For me, this one is one of those really crucial, awesome settings that the YNAB toolkit offers. So YNAB's default is that whenever you click on this little arrow down here, in order to open up one of your budgets, you have to click this open button, and then it pulls them all up right here. But if you have this budget quick switch turned on, I click the down arrow, all of my budgets are available to open up right here. So the reason that this is really helpful for me is because I have 3 main budgets that I toggle between a lot. I have a budget for my personal accounts, I have our joint account budget, and then I also have a budget for the ATB. And a lot of times when I am sitting down and working with my budgets, I have transfers back and forth between these accounts. So for me, I like to have this setting on because it's just a lot easier for me to jump back and forth between budgets when they're all right here. So the next one that I want to talk about is square negative mode. So this basically just changes the little button on YNAB that is like circular to square whenever you have overspent or whenever it is negative in that category. So this is what it looks like when it is turned off. And then when I turn it back on and I refresh, you'll see it's now square. This is just one of those like minor changes that change it aesthetically a little bit, but that for me makes a really big difference. It just makes it more prominent whenever I have overspent to help me to see when I have overspent. The third setting, and this is another really big one that I think everyone should have turned on, is toolkit reports. So YNAB automatically comes with its standard built-in reporting system. It includes a spending, little like pie chart here, your net worth, and then an income versus expense chart here. But I really feel like toolkit reports completely outshine YNAB's original reports. As you can see up here, there are so many other options. They have their own version of net worth. They also have their own versions of pie charts, but they don't just have spending by category. They also have spending by payee, where you can see specific different transactions that you've made. So this is really helpful in me being able to see that like a huge chunk of my money this month went toward a Gucci ring, which is Liz's engagement ring. As we can see, that was a really good chunk of my spending here, but it just gives you a visual on like individual payees and where your money is going. Another place that the toolkit reports really shine are here on the income breakdown. So when you first look at this, I know for me, I was like really confused. I didn't understand like what this was trying to tell me, but once I understood it, it made a lot of sense to me, and I really like how this visualizes your income versus your spending. So you can see here, this is all of the income that I have had between April and June of 2021. So this was my starting balance. This is what I already had inside of my accounts. So basically, these are my sources of income. So I can see where my money was coming from in that amount of time. All of this goes into my budget. So then it shows me here that this is my net gain. This is all of the money that I have kept inside of my account during that time. And this is what I have spent my money on. So this is a really good visualization of where my money has been going during this time. So you can see a lot of it is like this variable spending. I had some go toward taxes, and then I had some spending from my emergency fund. And then also Liz's ring, another big one, is up here. So this is just a really good visualization of exactly where your money is going. I also really love this graph here, which is your balance over time between all of your accounts. So I tend to keep all of these like unchecked, but this can kind of look a little bit confusing. So if you want to see just like what has my total balance done over the last however long, you can look at this. This is again from April to June, and it is showing me that here was like some of my spending, and then this was probably like my paychecks, and then we can see my spending, my paychecks. But generally, this gives me a good idea that my money is increasing over time. So if we click show this trend line, it'll show me that over the last couple of months, even though I have had some ups and downs, overall, I have been saving more than I am spending, which is really helpful for you to be able to see, especially over the long term. So again, highly recommend that you have this clicked on so that this toolkit report shows up. Now that is pretty much it for what I want to talk about on the general screen. So let's go ahead and go over to the account screen. Now these settings for account screen are what is going to affect this here. So this is basically just showing all of your income versus your expenses. It's like looking at reports from your bank account for all of the different accounts that you have hooked up in your budget. So if I turn this toolkit off and I go back to just like YNAB's default settings, whenever you input a transaction, let's say I spent money at Amazon inside of my variable spending for $4.53. When I click save, it automatically has it as an uncleared transaction, meaning it hasn't fully cleared either your checking account or your credit card. For me personally, more often than not, when I am going in and manually inputting different transactions, they've already cleared from my account. So whenever I turn the toolkit on, rather than when I input this not being cleared yet, and me having to check it, when I refresh and I have all of my settings on and I input a transaction from Amazon and click save, it automatically shows up as cleared. This is just a personal preference for me because I would prefer for it to automatically clear and I can unclear it if needed, because most of the time the transactions I'm putting in have cleared my account. Another personal preference when it comes to account settings is having this change behavior of enter key when adding transactions. The YNAB default whenever you are entering transactions is that once you put it in and you click enter, it adds this, but then assumes that you're going to add another transaction. And for me, that's usually not the case. I'm usually inputting one thing at a time, not multiple transactions. So when I go up here and I have this setting turned on, when I input a transaction and click enter, it's going to bring me right back to the screen rather than continually popping up to add another transaction. Again, this is another one of those small changes that just makes it easier for me and how I use my budget. The next setting I want to talk about is technically actually two settings. It's emphasize inflows and emphasize outflows. I always have both of these turned on, and what these do is just change the color of the inflows and outflows. So originally these are both like this black color, but because I have this turned on, outflows show up as red, inflows show up as green. For me, that just makes it easier when I am looking at a page like this, where there are a lot of inflows and outflows, for my brain to be able to say, okay, which one of these are money that I had coming in? Which one are money that I had coming out? Especially if something gets off in my budget and I need to figure out if I missed a transaction or if I duplicated a transaction, being able to just quickly decipher in my head which ones are which makes it a lot easier to navigate that for me. So I always have those two things on. Another setting that helps with my visualization of this account setting is turning on the striped transaction rows. So you can see here, without having the YNAB Toolkit on, it looks like this. We can also see how those outflows and inflows are black, and all of these are white. When I turn on my toolkit, it's a very subtle change, but you can see every other row is like lightly shaded in gray. So in my mind, it just again kind of helps break up those transactions, where if I have a lot of transactions that I'm looking at a time, it makes it easier for my brain to process that information. So that is it for the account settings. Let's go ahead and go to the budget screen. This is where we can do a lot of fun things. The budget screen is your main screen right here. This is one of the places that I feel like the YNAB Toolkit makes the most difference and has the most power to help you to really personalize how YNAB works for you. So to start off really simple, I always like to have the credit card emoji on. This just adds this little credit card emoji right here to credit card payments, because if you know anything about YNAB, then you know that these category groups are all customizable except for this credit card payments category group, because the way that YNAB does credit cards, it automatically generates this category group whenever you put in a credit card account onto your budget. And the default is that this little icon isn't here, but I like having the icon because it just helps my mind to see, okay, these are my credit cards. Another little aesthetic change that just helps me in my mind whenever I am looking and setting up my budget is to have this current month indicator turned on. So we can see whenever we have our budget here with YNAB, just its general settings, when we look at June and July and May, they all look the same. But when I go back through and I turn the toolkit back on and I have on this current month indicator, it turns June to this like blue box. But when I click over to July, July doesn't have the blue box here. That is just kind of showing me another, hey, you're working on this month right now, because a lot of times in YNAB, I try to budget a month ahead. So I am sometimes using today's paycheck, since it's June, to actually fund July. This just gives my brain another reminder whether I am currently on the month that we're in, or if I'm on somewhere ahead, or if I'm looking at a month that is already passed. Again, a small change, but it gives me a really good visual reminder. The next setting I want to talk about is the days of buffering metric, and this one I think is really important. This is another big one that I really recommend most people have turned on. So as a default in YNAB, you usually get this metric right here called age of money. For YNAB, in order to calculate this number, they take the day that you got paid and money came in, and the average number of days it took until that same money that came in was spent. Whereas this YNAB Toolkit days of buffering metric is a little bit different. In order to calculate this number right here, this days of buffering, they take the money that you have in your account, and they also take a look at your average spending in order to calculate how long you could, in theory, live off of the money you have in your account right now if you continued to spend how you have been spending on average and you didn't get paid again. So basically, this is like a representation of how much of a buffer you have in your finances. And we can see these are calculated a little bit differently because on our joint account, our age of money is 66 days, our days of buffering is 93. For me, days of buffering just makes more sense. That's the number that I like to take into account. I also really like that with days of buffering, you don't need a minimum amount of transactions inside of your account, whereas with age of money you do. So you'll see when I have clicked over here to my new personal budget, I set this up only like a month or two ago. I think like a month and a half ago. So it doesn't have an age of money here yet because I haven't made enough transactions outflowing for it to average the amount of buffer that I have inside of my budget. Whereas with the days of buffering, it does already have that. So it can tell me right here that I have 140 days, meaning that in theory, if I didn't get paid again and I kept spending on average what I have been spending in the past, with this $17,000 I have on hand, I could make it 140 days. Again, it's just a personal preference. For me, I keep both turned on inside of my budget, but I do like looking at the days of buffering metric more than the age of money metric. And a little subsetting to this one, I also like to have the days of buffering metric date turned on. So you can see here, I was like going back and forth so often it was glitching a little bit. But basically what this is that if I hover over this days of buffering, it will tell me at a quick glance that 140 days means that I would run out of money on, in theory, October 25th of 2021. It just converts that number of days into a specific date, which if you are someone who is trying to age your money, you are trying to build up an emergency fund, this can be a really, really helpful number to have. The next thing that I like to have turned on is this one right here, which is display total monthly goals. This is another one that I think a lot of people should just automatically have turned on. I wish it was just kind of given inside of YNAB. And what this does, it adds this section right here. So if you've seen my YNAB videos before, you know that I'm a big fan of having a goal on every category inside of your budget. This makes sure that you're on track. And the reason that I like it is because of what this number right here tells you. This number is telling me that in order for me to fund all of my goals during the month of June, I need to at least bring in this $2,749.43. So this is a really important number to have available to you, because if you create your budget and you start budgeting and you look over at this number and this is way more than you make in a month, then you know that you need to go back and start reassessing some of these goals that you have in mind, whether that is cutting back on some of your savings goals, some of your spending goals, maybe canceling some subscriptions that you don't use, however it is, to get this number below or right at what your income is. Now, this same number can actually be seen if you go over to a month that you haven't started to fund yet. So for me, I've already funded June and part of July. So I have to go over to August to see that standard number on this underfunded button. The issue is that if you don't have this setting turned on, this number goes away. So if I am looking at June, I have no idea how much the total of all of my goals is. I only know that I'm underfunded by $500, which in my case, I'm not actually, because I'm not currently funding these two goals, which add up to $500, but I have no way of knowing what my total goal amount is. Whereas when I have this setting turned on, no matter if I've already started budgeting this month or not, I can look and see, okay, in order to fund this whole month, I need to have an income of at least $2,700. And I know in my case, I do make that much, so I know that I'm in the green and I am good to keep my category goals where they are at. Okay, so one of the ones that I get asked about a ton, the days of buffering metric are one. People always ask me what that number is. And then also this goal indicator warning color. So I always have this turned on, and what this does is changes your default yellow goals to blue. So I'll show you what it looks like when the YNAB toolkit is not on. All of these goals right now that are underfunded are this like orangey yellow color. Personally, for me, it just gave me a lot of anxiety to see that, because it makes me think that I am not caught up on my finances, even when I am, because technically it's June, I'm good to go, other than my student loans. Like I said, those don't matter. I've got a lot of green going on here, but if I go over to July, it looks like I have a lot of yellow. But in reality, we're still a month away from July, so I'm still good to go. I didn't like seeing all of this yellow causing panic when I didn't need it to be. So whenever I have this setting turned on, it just changes the underfunded buttons to blue instead of yellow. So it looks like this. You can see they're blue, not yellow. I just like that more. So if you've heard me talk about my credit card debt before, you have probably heard me mention that YNAB is one of the biggest reasons why I feel comfortable spending money on credit cards now, even though I'm no longer in credit card debt. And one of the big reasons for that is that YNAB makes it very clear whenever you don't have enough money inside of your account to pay off your credit cards. This setting I really love, but only for specific situations. If you are someone who is currently struggling with credit card debt and you know that you don't have enough inside of your bank account to pay off your credit cards in full, don't worry about turning this setting on. But if you're someone who is looking for a way to spend on credit cards responsibly and to use them to your advantage, and you want to make sure you have a budget set up where you know at all points in time the spending that you have on your credit card you can afford and you can pay off in full, this is a really good setting to have. What this does is it turns this little button right here yellow if you have less budgeted to put toward your credit card than you currently have on your credit card. So for example, let's say something happened while I was trying to set up my budget. I overspent somewhere. This happens to me every once in a while when I'm like rectifying things and I don't notice it without this setting on. So for whatever reason, I actually only have $422 budgeted to put toward my Amex payment. But if we look over here, I have $462 sitting on my American Express right now. So at this point in time, I technically could not trust my budget to be able to fully fund my credit card payment. And with this turned on, YNAB warns me. So typically with YNAB's default settings, this would stay green even though I don't have enough money to cover my credit card in full. But since my goal is to be able to pay off my credit card every month, I want to be warned if this number is less than what is actually on my credit card so that I can fix it. And another part of that is that it adds this rectify difference button here. So I click rectify difference, it pulls money from to be budgeted to cover the difference between what is in my budget and what is on my credit card. I hope that makes sense. Credit cards inside of YNAB are a little tricky. If you have questions about that, I do have a video about navigating credit cards inside of YNAB coming up. If it's already up by the time that you are watching this video, I will put a little card right here, or you can find it on the YNAB playlist. Not everyone likes this setting, but for me and my situation, since I want to be able to make sure I can pay off my credit cards in full, I really like having that there. The next setting I keep on personally is this remove zero and negative categories when covering over budgeting. So for this, let's go ahead and add in that Amazon order that causes us to overspend in this treat yourself category right here. If I have my toolkit turned off, and I click to try to cover this overspending, YNAB is automatically going to give me every single category in my budget, even the categories that don't have any money in them or the other categories that are negative. For me, this isn't helpful because I don't want to cover overspending by overspending more. That defeats the whole point. Instead, if I go and click and turn on this toolkit with this setting on, when I go to cover this overspending, YNAB is only giving me categories that are in the green, meaning that they have some amount of money in them. that I can use to cover this overspending with. This just helps me to be able to visualize what options I have to cover this overspending a little bit easier without clouding it with a bunch of options that I can't actually choose from. Now, related to overspending, another setting that I really like to have turned on is this stealing from future alert. So you can see exactly what this does right here. This red is the settings from this button. What it does is it highlights in red and tells me, hey, right now in July, you have a -50 balance and you're to be budgeted. The reason for that is that I have this -50 right here and I haven't covered this overspending. But without this little warning, if I was just looking at my budget from here, I would have no idea that I was in the red come next month. Again, this has happened sometimes when I just get off track with my budget and I'm trying to reconcile things and I think, okay, I have $0 and to be budgeted, I'm good to go. But what I don't know is when I click over to July, something has happened and I've actually overspent in July and I didn't know that when I was looking at June. So I just like this because this is another warning saying, hey, it might look like you're good to go here, but in actuality, since you haven't fixed this overspending, YNAB is automatically taking that from July's to be budgeted. So basically, it's exactly what it says. It lets you know whenever you are stealing money from future months. Another setting that is a personal preference I like to have on is this to be budgeted warning. So what this does is changes this to be budgeted button to yellow whenever you have unallocated money. If I have this $27.04, you can see it went from green to this like orangey yellow color, which is just another reminder to me when I'm looking at my budget that, hey, I have money that has not been given a job yet. I need to figure out what this money needs to do for me. For this next setting, we're actually going to go down here to these like little things that not a lot of people look at. To this first one that says add pacing to budget. Now, right now you can see that it's disabled on mine, and that is because the way that I have my personal account set up, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But where I think that this pacing really shines is with variable spending. So I'm gonna hop over here to my join account, and now I am going to turn this on. And you can see whenever I refreshed, what this did is it added this extra column right here, this 5th column for pacing. Now, I personally would go ahead and it has a setting where if you just click on it, it'll like turn it off. I would turn it off for everything other than your variable expenses. So I would just like unhighlight all of those and just focus on these variable expenses here. So let's say I have spent $25 on household items. We needed some stuff to like repair something on the wall. We got that from Amazon, and then we also got some cat food from Amazon. And we actually got cat food and litter, so together that was $40. If I come over here to my budget, we can see in this pacing column, we have some yellow warnings. Now, this does not mean that we've overspent because we can see here in this available column, I put $40 toward household items. I've spent $25, which leaves me $15. Same thing for cat food. I've budgeted $60 this month. I spent $40, still leaves me $20. Technically, I'm still in the green. However, so what this box is basically telling me is, hey, in this instance right now, it's June 8th, and I've already spent more than half of my available money, and we're not halfway through the month yet. So if I am trying to stay on track with, let's say, grocery spending or eating out, if I have already spent the majority of the money available to me inside of this category and we're not even halfway through the month yet, this pacing is gonna let me know, hey, you're technically 11 days behind schedule, meaning that you have spent more money than you technically should be if you're trying to pace yourself in this category. And I love this setting for variable expenses because I get a lot of questions about how do I go about budgeting for things like groceries and gas when these are variable. I don't know exactly how much I'm going to spend. This can help you to stay on track because if my goal is to only spend $40 on household items and I'm on a roll and I've already spent $25, but we're not halfway through the month yet, this is going to give me a heads up like, hey, you might want to either add some more money to this category or slow down on your spending, because if you continue spending at this rate, you are going to run out of money and or overspend in this category by the end of the month. For me, this is really helpful when it comes to eating out because I know that a lot of times with categories like eating out or groceries, I end up spending a lot of money at the beginning of the month and then find myself like the last half of the month really trying to be frugal and cut back because I don't have a lot of money left in these categories. And using this pacing column from the toolkit for YNAB can help you to recognize when you are spending too quickly inside of these categories. And of course, there are going to be times where you might end up spending more or less at the beginning or the end of the month. But if you're the kind of person who could really benefit from a visual of when you might be spending too much to make it through the rest of the month, adding this column can be really helpful. So another one inside of this budget screen down here at the bottom is this toggle master categories. I like to enable the one that says enable toggle all categories. Sorry, try saying that 10 times fast. What this does is it literally just adds this little arrow right here, which allows you, if I click it, it'll close all of my categories and just show me my category groups. And then if I click it again, it expands it back. This is just really helpful because if I were wanting to analyze some of my spending, let's say just in my variable expenses, it's very easy for me to just pop open those, and then if I want to open the rest of my budget, I can click this arrow rather than having to individually click all of these little arrows to close all of those category groups. Whew. Okay, we are done with the budget screen settings, so let's move on to the report screen settings. Now, I'm gonna touch on all of these individually, but just know that I like having all three of these on. So as we were talking about earlier, YNAB comes with its automatic reports screen. So all of these settings pretty much just apply to this income versus expense screen inside of the original YNAB reports. So we can see this is what it looks like originally. It takes up a lot of room. It's kind of hard to like analyze the whole thing without having to scroll back up and down. There's a lot of white space. Now, if I turn on the toolkit, this is what that same screen looks like. So you can see it's a lot more compact. It uses a lot less white space. It also allows you, as you hover, it highlights the row that you're on. And the last thing that it changes is it changes all the zeros to just blank little slots. For me, it just makes it easier for me to look at this report and see my spending and understand it when it's not so cluttered. So that is it for the 20 plus categories inside of the YNAB toolkit that I love, use, and recommend. So hopefully you learned something cool and you have learned how you can use the toolkit to make YNAB the best that it can be for you. If you enjoyed, please remember to give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm, helps boost this video to the top. That way more people can find this content. And I will see you all next time. Bye.